Hello and welcome to Meet the Media. I'm Eusebius Mckaiser. Last week, news of yet another lesbian killing rocked the LGBTI community. The death of Noluvo Swelindau has necessitated a very important conversation this morning on how the media reports on sexual and gender minorities. But that's coming up a little bit later. As always, however, we have a look first at the front pages of the newspapers as well as what's been happening in the news cycle over the past 7 days or so. And I am delighted to say that I'm joined by Khadija Patel, who's a friend of the show, but she's here today for the first time wearing her new hat as the new editor of the Mail and Guardian newspaper. Khadija, thank you so much for coming in again.
Thank you very much.
And congratulations on the job. By the way, what has it been like in the first couple of weeks?
Well, it's been frenetic, especially considering the time of year that we're entering in. A lot of admin that needs to be done, a lot of sort of clearing out, of admin, etc. But it's been a very exciting time to enter the Mail and Guardian newsroom, I think.
Sure, but also, don't lie, I've seen you moaning on Facebook. You have meetings about meetings, fighting in the parking lot about your special new parking bay. Is the bureaucracy getting in the way of journalism?
Not at all, not at all. It's always going to be quite an adjustment to, especially coming from a small startup like the Daily Vox, going into a big corporate affair like the Mail and Guardian. It is an adjustment, but I think that I've settled well. There's a very nice bunch of people at the Mail and Guardian, particularly in the newsroom, where we have a very strong team. So it's been very easy to settle in and actually look forward to.
Well, look, it's well deserved. It's a great paper, and of course you're going to do fine things. Let's see how your competitors are doing this morning. The Sunday Times, let's start with them. They have an interesting lead story. Gupta's 10 billion rand jackpot. You can see it here over my left shoulder. Zuma's friend. How's that for a little bit of nasty? Now South Africa's richest black businessman. And you said you found this one interesting, Khadija.
It is quite interesting. So, we know that the Sunday Times or Business Times rich list is something that many people look forward to every year, even if it is with a twinge of envy. But it's quite interesting that Atul Gupta, considering all the headlines of state capture this year, is now wealthier than even Patrice Motsepe.
But I can already see so-called paid Twitters going, why are you not talking about white monopoly capital that is actually number 1 to number 6 on the list?
And on cue, I was just checking Twitter just now, just to check for that exact commentary, and that's exactly what they're saying. They're saying, well, he's coming in at number 7, I think. So and yet the Gupta family dominates news headlines. Yes. So what about the other?
It is an interesting one. If you were editor of the Sunday Times rather than the lovely Mail and Guardian, would this be a front page story for you?
You see, considering the time of year that we're in.
The silly news cycle.
It is a silly news cycle, and also considering that we've had a very difficult year as well.
Fair enough.
So I think that it is quite a challenge. It was a challenge in our newsroom this week as well, to put together a front page that we know, is going to get sold.
Absolutely.
As well.
No, it makes sense. Let's move on to the City Press, which is also quite interesting. How Schlaudi sold the SABC. Now, we've known for a while now, Khadija, obviously, the absolute horrendous selling of SABC archives. But what Charles Blichnot and Lloyd Kedia did very well in this story is that we have more detail and texture now around this and possible benefits running to the tune of millions to Schlaudi himself as a result of the details of that commercial agreement, which obviously is horrendous between SABC and MultiChoice.
Absolutely, and I think that what's interesting is that we finally have the proof there.
Yes.
The City Press have done excellently, I think, with this story, and I think they must be credited as well for being on top of the SABC story consistently.
That's very true. Because what I thought to myself, I was like, okay, that's really new, and then I read it carefully, and I thought, actually, let me be fair on Charles and City Press, because we all know an intuition, but what's key in journalism is evidence, and the evidence in this story is absolutely fantastic.
Absolutely. And I think that it is an excellent piece of investigative journalism, and it shows again, once more, and I think that if we haven't yet realized this year the value of good investigative journalism in South Africa to underpin our democracy, then, we are struggling without it. The media in general, but I think as a society as well, it's exactly this kind of story that shows us.
And of course, what's particularly disturbing here, besides the evidence-based journalism, is the detail of it as well. That archiving history, that's so important for a public broadcaster, and to simply hand the kind of stuff over to another platform is utterly irresponsible.
Absolutely, and again, it shows how the SABC is failing in its mandate as the public broadcaster, where we're seeing that narrow personal interests are taking
absolutely.
precedence over its mandate.
Absolutely.
I mean, the SABC is not the competitor of eNCA, for example. It is the public broadcaster. It has a very different mandate, and we're seeing with a story like this how the public broadcaster continues to fail.
Absolutely. The Sunday Independent has an interesting story. ANC Zuma wars, and I thought, oh come on! I mean, even that surely we know by now there are wars inside the ANC. What is interesting, of course, and I wasn't aware of this yesterday, is that Blade is upping the ante as well and finally saying, you know what, even if I had to lose my cabinet job, maybe he knows something that you and I don't know about a young reshuffle before Christmas, that is fine. He is a cabinet minister for the country. So this is interesting because those internal factional battles are really spilling out into the public.
Absolutely, and quite interestingly as well that people like Blade Monday and Ace Magashula, who's referred to in this article here, are coming out very, very openly, speaking very candidly about what they feel should happen now. I mean, it was quite interesting. A few days after the last ANC meeting, Premier Magashula told the Mail and Guardian, for example, that he feels that all those ministers who had, sort of stood against the president should now lose their jobs. That was, it's open warfare, really. And how long can it actually go on this way?
And what's going to be interesting here in terms of the tripartite alliance, of course, is that relationship between the SACP and the ANC has always historically been interesting. And for a lot of the ANC ministers who are also members of the SACP, this obviously raises the strategic question of whether or not they need to rethink that particular relationship.
Absolutely, and I think that's going to be interesting going forward. We already see Cosatu coming out saying that they're ready to lobby for Deputy President Ramaphosa's leadership of the ANC.
Yes. That's right.
And we know where the SACP stands on these matters. So the ANC, I think, is in a very, very interesting moment.
Well, on the plus side for us in the media, it does mean that perhaps there is still some breaking news left in December, depending on what JZ might get up to.
I don't think journalists would be too happy with hearing that.
Khadija, thank you so much for coming on the show. All the best with your new leadership role, and congratulations as well being in the helm of the Mail and Guardian.
It's always a pleasure.
Coming up after the break, we discuss how the South African media reports on gender and sexual minorities. Of course, we'd love to hear from you. Remember that you can join the conversation by using the hashtag #MeetTheMedia and share your thoughts. Please do stay with us.